I had always imagined owning a peaceful retreat, somewhere far removed from endless meetings, cameras, and the constant noise of politics. So last year, I finally made that dream a reality. I purchased a breathtaking mountain mansion, a private sanctuary tucked deep within quiet wilderness. To keep my public roles separate from my personal life, I bought it under a private trust. What I didn't realize at the time was that this slice of paradise came with a hidden ruler, a strict homeowners association, and at the center of it all was a woman I'll call Karen. My first encounter with the HOA seemed minor, almost laughable. It was about my mailbox. According to them, it was positioned 2 inches too far to the left. The penalty? A $30 fine. Strange, sure, but I paid it without much thought. Then came another notice, this time about my lawn. The grass, they claimed, was a 1/4 inch too long. That cost me $50. Soon after, I was fined $100 because my trash cans were visible from the street for an hour longer than allowed after pickup. It was absurd. Week after week, a new petty violation appeared in my mailbox, each one more ridiculous than the last. I tried to handle it reasonably. I even called Karen, the HOA president, explaining that I was frequently away on business. I kept things vague, but made it clear that some of these rules were unrealistic to maintain consistently. Her response never changed. She spoke in a condescending tone, lecturing me about community standards, and finishing every conversation with the same smug reminder: rules are rules. The fines didn't just continue, they escalated. At the time, I was deeply involved in pushing a major state infrastructure bill, working 16-hour days without pause. The HOA notices became background noise, an ongoing irritation I plan to address later. I had my assistants handle the payments, but occasionally a notice would slip through the cracks or a deadline would be missed by a day. That's when the late fees started piling on. What began as a few $100s quickly ballooned into thousands. The letters grew more aggressive, filled with threats about liens and legal consequences. I brushed it off, assuming it was just intimidation. A power trip fueled by Karen and her board. After all, no reasonable organization would actually escalate things over something as trivial as grass length or mailbox placement, right? I couldn't have been more wrong. One Friday afternoon, I was wrapping up a press conference at the state capitol when my phone buzzed with security alert. Motion detected at the front gate. I opened the app, expecting something minor, but what I saw made my heart drop. A bulldozer was rolling onto my property. Behind it stood a demolition crew, and right there, holding a clipboard with a victorious smirk on her face, was Karen. I watched in disbelief as the bulldozer's massive metal claw slammed into my front door, shattering the oak into splinters. The sound of cracking wood and breaking glass echoed through my phone. They weren't issuing warnings. They weren't negotiating. They were tearing down my house. I immediately called my lawyer, my voice shaking with anger. They're demolishing my house. I told him. The HOA over fines. He was just as stunned as I was. He urged me to stay calm and said he would begin emergency legal action immediately, but it was already too late to stop what was happening. That entire weekend, I watched helplessly through the live security feed as my dream home was reduced to rubble. Every crash, every collapsing wall felt personal. At some point, Karen sent me an email, one I didn't see until later, gloating about how, under some obscure and rarely enforced bylaw, the HOA had the authority to seize and demolish properties with extensive unpaid violations that harmed the community's aesthetic. It was outrageous, it was unlawful, and it felt targeted. By Monday morning, I made a decision. Instead of heading to my office at the Capitol, I drove straight to the HOA's monthly meeting, held in a cramped, stuffy clubhouse. I walked in alone, dressed in a simple suit, no security, no entourage. About 30 residents filled the room. At the front, Karen stood confidently at the podium, smiling as she spoke. She was proudly describing what she called successful removal of the blighted property on Lot 72, my property. She talked about maintaining standards and improving the community, painting me as a negligent homeowner who had disrespected the neighborhood. A few people even clapped, clearly satisfied with what had been done. When she finished, she asked if anyone had questions. I raised my hand. She glanced at me with a dismissive expression and said, "Yes, do you have a comment?" I stood up, walked calmly to the front, and positioned myself beside the podium. I looked out at the room, then turned to face her. "I do," I said evenly. "My name is Governor Thompson, and you just demolished my house." The room went completely silent. You could feel the air shift. People froze. Karen's confident smile vanished instantly, replaced by pure shock. Her face drained of color, then flushed red as she struggled to process what she had just heard. "Governor, that can't be," she stammered. I turned to the audience. "I bought that home as a private citizen looking for peace. Instead, I was harassed, fined excessively, and ultimately had my property illegally destroyed by this board, led by Ms. Henderson." I held up a thick file. "This is no longer just about my house." I continued. "This is about a clear abuse of power." Then I dropped the bombshell. I announced that my office was launching a full-scale state investigation into the predatory practices of this HOA and others like it. I informed them that my legal team had already filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the board members personally for the destruction of my property and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I also made it clear that the state attorney general was reviewing potential criminal charges, including property destruction and fraud. Karen looked like she might collapse on the spot. The rest of the board stared down at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The residents who had been clapping just moments earlier now looked deeply uncomfortable, some even frightened. The fallout came quickly, and it was decisive. The investigation uncovered years of financial mismanagement, selective enforcement, and widespread abuse of authority. Karen and the entire board were forced to resign. A massive civil judgment was handed down against them, one their insurance refused to cover. Several were forced to sell their own homes just to pay damages, and some are now facing criminal charges. Using the findings, we pushed forward new legislation at the state level, what we call the Homeowners Bill of Rights. Its purpose was simple: to protect residents from exactly this kind of predatory HOA behavior. It passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. As for my mountain property, it's still just an empty lot for now, but I will rebuild. And this time, there won't be an HOA telling me where my mailbox belongs. People say revenge is best served cold. I don't agree. Sometimes, it's best delivered with the full authority of the governor's office.